we're going to talk about what aperture is actually doing to your landscape photography. And most landscape photographers are using f11 for a reason. And in order to understand this, we have to talk about stops and the behavior of lenses, because f11, or the aperture, or the so-called iris of your lens, isn't a feature of your camera, it's a feature of your lens. If you take a closer look at your lens, then there's your focal range written on your lens and your aperture written on your lens. And I am currently using what is called a zoom lens with a variable aperture, and I have a 70 to 300 millimeter lens, and the aperture of this lens is f4.5 to 6.3, which means that the widest my aperture can get is 4.5 at the wide end and 6.3 at the long end. And I go all the way down to f4.5. And if I zoom with my lens, you see that I'm stopped down all the way to f6.3 just by changing my focal length. And this is what a variable aperture zoom lens is doing. Those lenses are usually a little bit cheaper because you don't have a constant aperture by zooming. If you work events, if you shoot weddings, it's a hassle to keep in mind that your aperture is changing by your zoom range. But in landscape photography, we can work around it. After you understood what a variable aperture is, we talk about the actual f-stop increments, because how f-stops are working is very unintuitive. You've heard numbers like f1.8, 1.4, 2.8, f2, and instead of don't understanding what they are, you should start to familiarize yourself with the order of f-stops. The correct order of full f-stops goes like f1.4, f2, f2.8, f4, f5.6, f8, f11. Everything else doesn't really matter most of the time. What do we do with this knowledge? Every full f-stop is increasing or decreasing the amount of light by 100%. The aperture is doing four distinguished things. And the first thing is controlling the light. Like I said, you can open or close the iris of your lens and therefore control the amount of light and control the exposure of your picture. Your aperture is controlling the so-called depth of field of your camera, which means the smaller your iris, the more stuff in your image is actually in focus. And the third thing is that your aperture is affecting the sharpness of your image. And usually, as a rule of thumb, if you stop down a lens twice, you get the sharpest point of it. And very expensive lenses are very sharp wide open and a little bit sharper if you stop down twice, but cheap lenses like I like to use are very soft wide open and getting a lot sharper if you stop down twice. And the fourth thing your aperture is doing is it's increasing corner sharpness. So if you shoot wide open, then your corners are soft. If you stop down, you increase the corner sharpness, and that's why you don't want to shoot wide open in landscape photography as well. For example, if there's an important part of your picture in the corner, you want it as sharp as possible, and then you don't want to shoot wide open. Even if you focus on this point, it's not as sharp as something that would be in the center of your lens. Okay, we talked a lot about technology and we talked about a lot about stuff to learn, but I'm about to take a picture of this tree. The vision on this tree is very cluttered. If I go a little bit to the left, there's a tree that's blocking the side. And if I go a little bit to the right, there's another tree blocking the side. I walked around the entire pond and think that currently this is the best viewing angle on this tree. In about half an hour, the sun is setting. I don't know if I stay here and hope for the best or just walk straight to the next valley in order to figure out a nice shot with the sun, or maybe not. I try to adjust the composition a little bit in order to get a nice picture. I cut into the tree to prevent the clutterness of the surroundings, and there's still a little twig on the bottom, and I really hope I can remove the little twig on the bottom in post-production. But back to topic. I take a picture at f4.5, then I stop down 1, 2, 3, which is a full stop from f4.5, and then I stop down another full stop. 1, 2, 3. This is f9, and I go a little bit beyond that in order to be completely sure that I got a bigger depth of field, and that's why most people are using f11, because when I'm at f6.3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's almost stopped down twice. After we talked about aperture, ISO and shutter speed, I reduced the shutter speed to 1/25 of a second because there's not much movement over there. And I increased the ISO to ISO 1600 because I think that this is the highest I can go with getting a very clean shot in a very dark scene. And I stopped down to f9. I deliberately make the choice to change f11 to f9 in order to get more light and reduce the ISO in order to get a nicer, cleaner looking image. And all that's left to do is press the shutter.